TCG ban list is about to change. Cyberstorm Access is on its way in, and we have the biggest event of the season leading up to the pinnacle event, the World Championships. Guys, if you could do something that over 78% of you haven't done already, is just simply click that subscribe button. It goes a long way towards the channel, and it allows me to keep making videos like this in the future. Alright, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So we have 12 cards that I think are going to be hit on the list or changed and altered in some way. I expect the ban list to drop this week / early next week. The new core set does change a lot within the game. Every year, this set specifically, leading up to Nationals / Euros / Worlds, always has a huge impact on the game because every part of this set usually makes the decks explosive. That's a pattern that Konami usually follow, so just take note of that for future years moving forward leading up to Nationals, Euros and Worlds. This is the first card that I reckon will get banned on the TCG ban list, and that is number 89, Diablo Esther Mine Hacker. Now, when this first got announced as a prize card, players weren't very happy or excited comparing this to like Minerva. It didn't seem very good. We didn't expect 5 / 6 years later for it to be that good. Card makes Kashtira very interesting and very good. Once this gets banned, it means decks can free up certain spots in their deck, which makes them more consistent, and they can pilot other cards to allow them to beat the meta. Kashtira has been pretty consistent in terms of winning events, apart from the 250 event in London. And this card has to go. It just weakens the deck, and I do think this is a fitting fit for it. Next, we have Branded Expulsion. Now, Branded Expulsion is pretty solid. This card can give the gimmick puppet to your opponent, and it's a lingering effect. In my opinion, of lingering effects are very frustrating and annoying to deal with, and I think they should just be removed from the game entirely. Abyss Dweller is probably another card that I would like to see go, but right now there's no decks that it can really hit. But eventually it has to be on the ban list. This card makes sense to go. I mean, if they just get rid of gimmick puppet, then players will just play other cards instead to abuse Expulsion. This card should just go. Makes decks very unfair to deal with it. But yeah, this is one card that I would like to see move. Next, on the limited section, you got to note, what will Konami try and do with this ban list? So the way I'm looking at it is, they usually tend to weaken decks around this time because they don't want to alienate all the decks in the game. They like to have a bunch of various decks in the format. So you can still play the chosen deck that you're used to in Nationals or Euros. But remember though, that comes at a cost. Because the new set is so good, they usually will give you a decision. Do you want to play your weakened deck restricted by the ban list, or do you want to play something much stronger? Which, yes, it will encourage you to buy new cards from the new set, but it's a good compromise. So the first card on a limited section, I would say, would be Kashtira Unicorn. Now, Unicorn is the card that gets the deck going. This card is amazing in terms of what one card can do with a deck. This card is probably the best one to hit. Now, I did compare it to should we just hit Kashtira Theosis. Now, I do like the idea of just hitting that card. However, I like Theosis and what it can do because it doesn't restrict the deck all entirely. It still allows it to play if you open it with a weak Kashtira monster. And moving forward as well, we're going to see a lot of Ash Blossoms in this format. So Theosis is probably a better card to leave at free compared to Unicorn. Next up, we have Runic Fountain. Now, we could hit Runic Tip, but with Tip going to 1 in Fountain, that still being at free, players would then just opt to play free Fountain, and Tip wouldn't be the best card to hit. With Fountain going to 1, it means players can't abuse 2 in a turn, but also they get restricted by Cosmic Cyclone. They lose Cosmic Cyclone more. Cosmic Cyclone gains more value against this deck, which means I do believe Runic Fountain is the card to hit in this type of deck. Next up, we have Sprite Blue. Now, I did decide Blue over Starter. The reason why I think Blue should go over Starter is because Starter restricts you straight away, limits you to level 2s, and link 2s, and rank 2s. Blue leads to so much more, and it's very good late game as well. I do think this card is probably one of the best ones to hit. You could arguably hit Jet, but Blue gets you to so much more. Blue gets you to a monster negation, a spell and trap negation, where Jet gets you to Starter or a non-targetable removal. So I feel like having Starter or Jet at 3 and Blue at 1 and leaving Starter at 3 is fine. And it's quite hard to abuse Sprite Blue when it's only one card in your deck, because obviously Sprite Elf is gone. So I feel like this is the best card to hit. Next, we have Branded Opening. Now, I couldn't decide between this and Aluba. However, I do feel like with the format playing free Draw and Lockbird in nearly every deck, I feel like this deck should in somewhat be hit and not be able to play around Draw that as much. And I think Opening is probably the better one to hit compared to Aluba. Now, if Aluba is at 3, yes, Branded Fusion can still be searched by it. But yes, there is Veilers and Impermanences in the format. I do feel like this is probably the best one to touch. Now, I don't want Konami to kill all the decks with this prediction. I don't think they will. I just think they're going to hinder them in some way by hitting their best cards. And you could hit Branded Fusion over Branded Opening, but I just feel that's too soon. I feel like the deck isn't like strong enough yet to warrant that. But I do feel like you have to hit the deck in some way, or else it's just too consistent and it will arguably be the best deck to play. Imagine having free Aluba, free Opening, and free Branded Fusion. That's just too strong. So they have to hit one of the 3. And I think players won't be that mad at putting Opening to 1 compared to Fusion or Aluba. I mean, they probably would want free Opening over and just one Aluba. But yeah, I think Opening's the best one. Next up, we have Triple Tactics Talent. Now you're probably wondering, why would we want to limit talents when there's 3 Triple Tactics Frost now in the game? This card is going to be a very big problem for a lot of players in the format. Every deck will play it, or every deck will lead into playing it. Right now they might be like, okay, cool, we don't actually need it. But you'll find that this card will win a lot of games, and you'll decide that you actually want to include it in your Nationals deck list or your European Championships deck list. This card will be the card that wins tournaments, and if this card is at 3, it'll be a big problem. A lot of decks are playing multiple hand traps now, so even if you go first and get interrupted, this card's a great card. You could just draw 2, unless you've been drawing Lockbird, but then you can look at your opponent's hand, which will allow you then to remove a further hand trap that could stop you from playing, or you can remove a key card from your opponent's hand that will stop them from playing. Plus, the knowledge of the card that it gives you is huge. You'll know what to set up, you'll know what to prepare against, and that's just really important. And I believe this card should be the one that goes to 1. And yeah, every deck will still play at 1. This card, in my opinion, is probably one of the best spells in the game right now, and it's very hard to top it. Now, moving on to the semi-limited section. First up is Cypher Gamma. This card is probably the best hand trap in the game. This card, in my opinion, is probably the second best hand trap ever printed. First one being Max C. Gamma is very strong. The ability just to be able to negate and destroy, and negate the activation of a monster, and then destroy it is huge. You're clearing away a threat whilst negating it. And if it's your turn whilst you're doing that, it allows you to set up Omega. Or you can use your level 2 tuner to link it to synchro into Herald, or to synchro, or well, even overlay into a link 2, so it makes Sprite even better. You're putting 35 damage on the board. It's a very strong card. So this card has to go to 2, and I wouldn't be surprised if it even goes to 1. Gamma has to just go to 2. The card is just too strong. Every deck should be playing it, and every deck will be playing it moving forward into the new set, with the new format. And next up in the semi-limited section is Pot of Prosperity. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, why Prosperity? It allows decks to play. It allows the weaker decks to be able to compete against the best decks. But this card is just too strong. Being able to see 3 or 6 cards of your deck, so if you start your turn with 5 and you're seeing 3 or 6 cards, that means you're seeing either 8 or 11 cards of your 40 card deck. That's broken. That's really strong. This card has to be restricted in some way. Yes, it is a card that would turn on Draw and Lockbird, but this card lets you dig into so much more. Even imagine going second, post side deck. You're drawing your 6th card, then you play Prosperity and you're revealing 6 more. You're now seeing 12 of your 40 card deck, post side, where your side deck will now have either Evenleys, Lightning Storms, cards that will really target your opponent. How is that fair? That's too strong. This card just has to go to 2. I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually put this card to 1. It's probably one of the best pot cards in the game, and the ability just to be able to decide which card you banish from your etch deck just makes it too good. So this card just has to go to 2. Next up, going to trio to free, is Salamangreat Gazelle. Salamangreat is a solid deck, very consistent, a very controlling deck, but it's not too powerful. Like, the only real powerful line this deck has is Update Jammer, Transcode Talker, leading into Access Code Talker. I do think, though, Update Jammer should probably be banned. I did contemplate putting that on the list because I do think Update Jammer will cause a lot of problems this format. That would be like a wildcard suggestion that I would put it in the banned section. So I do think that card should go. But ultimately, Gazelle going to 2 wouldn't mean much of a difference, even going to 3. Like, if it went to 2, sure. But going to 2 is kind of the same thing as going to 3. So I think they might as well put it to 3. Allow Salamangreat decks to play. They won't do that much when the comparison deck would be Mathmech, and Mathmech is a solid deck. But then again, Mathmech is losing to Droll and Lockbird more, and especially if every deck is maining it. So give them, those type of players, an alternative deck, such as Salamangreat. Next up in the trio, we have Ancient Fairy Dragon. This card is a crazy card going back to 1. And I'm surprised it even came back off the ban list, even with the errata. This card could cause a lot of problems in the format. 1, because it's an extender. 2, it lets you add an additional field spell that you need, which can add another extender. And also the other thing on this card is it's just easier to make into Baron, and it just lets you play more. This card should probably just not have come back, but there's no real difference of it being at 1 or going to 3. So I do think this card should just go to 3. And finally, a card where some players might disagree with me, but if it went to 2, it wouldn't make sense because it still wouldn't see play. So it might as well go to 3, and that's Spellbook of Judgment. Spellbook of Judgment, yes, used to be probably the best spell card in the game. Like, much more powerful than other spells that were previously banned. Like, Spellbook of Judgment would argue better than like Graceful Charity in the spellbook deck. But now there's a time where spellbooks aren't very good. And now, unless they get support, this would change. And we know what support have been doing. Like, if you look at all the decks Konami's been giving support to, reviving these old decks, they're becoming very good again. And Konami won't stop that trend, it seems. It seems they're going to keep reviving these decks. So, unless Spellbook are planning to get more support, then they should put this to 3. If they are getting more support, then leave it at 1, which will then still mean the deck will be very good. Let me know what you think below. Tell me what you think is right or wrong with this list. And if you have any friends who you think would enjoy this type of content, please feel free to share it to them. Without further ado, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.